All right, it's Bronzebird here with another video. Before I begin, like and subscribe. Thank you. So, it's funny the conversations that come in this week. I'm actually deciding whether I want to put out some more videos circling around election day and give my opinions of what I believe is now the outward fight or the civil war that's going between so-called black men and so-called black women in this society. Because it seems like it's unfolding ever so much more, especially with the so-called black man who's deciding to say, I don't want to deal with the Democratic Party no more. And I want to break up with this nonsense of feeling like the matriarchy is taking over the so-called black community. Such as say, we're also dealing with the times of the cancel culture. You got to be careful if you say certain things, especially me being a YouTube content creator. I don't even know if I'm being shadow banned on half of the videos that I put out because I speak so strongly on certain issues. And now you can't say certain words, you can't say certain phrases. If it's a topic that's supposed to be controversial, they're asking you to put the video down or it's private, you get a strike, all these different things. So the way of free speech, First Amendment, Second Amendment, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I could only expect it to strengthen as time goes on. Now, today I want to take a look at this Tiffany Cross case that's going on, her reportedly being removed from the network MSCNBC or whatever you want to call it. I keep getting messed up. Okay, MSNBC. And not too many times a lot of these networks, you know, um, is getting so-called black people to be involved in it. Usually it has to deal with so-called black people that they want to serve as the pro-wokes. And they have no problem with so-called black women joining their networks because, as it says, they want to pay attention more to the so-called black woman than they pay attention to the so-called black man. And the only way that the so-called black man is going to be put in is if he's a downright pro-woke that has no problem calling out his own people in defense of the so-called black community. That's just how I see it. But before I begin, honestly, you see now a whole entire workings of so-called black people who decide to say Tiffany Cross is being canceled and we should fight back and boycott MSNBC because of it. But nobody wants to cancel what's going on with Kanye West, with Adidas, uh, what's happening with him and these different branches of places that he had got money from, was working with labels and all these different things that want to cancel him and say you can't work with us anymore. Nobody wants to cancel them, right? Nobody wants to cancel the NBA because Kyrie Irving had said certain things that would be listed as anti-Semitic, right? So to the point that I'm making, a lot of the things that you're seeing now take out in media is only a prelude to how they're going to treat the person who says what they say under the idea of free speech. In my honest opinion, it will become strengthened. That there is going to be more controls on what you can and what you cannot say. They're just using certain antics as a Trojan horse so those people will know you can't say these certain things. Especially here on YouTube, there's going to definitely be a pause button where a person's channel might be deleted, a person's channel might be shadow banned and all these different things if they haven't already for certain issues that they bring up. You know, you're starting to see it every day. And I mean, a lot of, content creators is getting pissed off because some of them are actually making money off of their controversial opinions. So what would the world revolve in as we get into this new paradigm shifting after the pandemic, right? The rebuild structure. What do we tolerate and what don't we tolerate? Because it will become biased. Those that say certain things might not be reprimanded the same way that the other person might be reprimanded. But we got to see how things unfold. So I'm going to have you look at this video. I'm going to make some commentary off of it as I, give my opinions on it. Think it's very interesting how this is going to play out and how things is going. So, Pete.
a group of African Americans released a letter today blasting MSNBC's decision to part ways with Tiffany Cross. This letter was, I was one of the folks who actually signed the letter as well, was released today publicly, and I want to read it for you. All right, folks, pull it up, please. The letter states, "Dear Miss Jones," this is addressed to Rashida Jones, African-American, who is the president of MSNBC, the first African-American to be president of a news network. "We write to you on behalf of the Cross Connection viewing audience, which is made up of more than 35% of Black Americans and other people of color who tune in every weekend. Throughout her more than 20 years in media, Tiffany Cross has been a consistent light of truth. Her integrity is a hallmark of her career on which her steadfast audience has come to rely. Ms. Cross is a trusted communicator, friend, and validator to marginalized communities who too often find their voices and valuable perspectives missing from mainstream media."
Now let's pause that there. I know this is a real well-detailed letter, and they're going to get into this whole entire conversation, but I've said it and I've said it again. So the problem is when you're dealing with the so-called Black people, so-called Black women, or so-called Black men in general that have that pro-woke mentality, they usually promote globalism. Now, this is supposed to be a letter that's supposed to be getting upset at the fact of the matter that Tiffany Cross is being let go from MSNBC, right? She's supposed to be talking about the issues that plague the so-called Black community, quote unquote. Why is it that they consistently want to bring up other marginalized communities of color when it comes to these conversations? Because I bet you right now, just to give you an example, Mexicans do not give a shit about so-called Black people's problems. Latinas that live down in South America do not give a shit about what's going on with so-called Black Americans. See, this is something that I start to realize, and I'm just like, more so immigrants don't care about so-called Black people's issues. But yet and still, here we are letting out a hand to those that don't care about us, which I find ironic. But anyway.
"Nowhere was this more true than on her MSNBC show, The Cross Connection. Her authentic audience connection and intentional truth-telling made it MSNBC's highest-rated weekend show, becoming appointment viewing for a committed audience and made the show's topics and host trend weekly. That is why we are deeply disappointed in the abrupt cancellation of The Cross Connection and the unexpected ouster of its host just 4 days before a critical midterm election. This decision was announced just 2 weeks after a targeted, racist, and misogynistic strike against both Ms. Cross's reporting and character from a known racist and anti-Semite, Fox News host Tucker Carlson."
And you know what's really funny about that? I've actually had the pleasure of watching Tucker Carlson for a while. There's certain things that I agree with Tucker Carlson about, but what makes him a racist? What makes him an anti-Semite? Because if Tucker Carlson was to be an anti-Semite, would he be deleted from his proportion that he gives every week on his network? I mean, on his show? It's so funny that there's always these ways of trying to regulate and say that, see, it goes back to my argument. Sorry. It goes to my argument about this. When someone is being reprimanded that's so-called Black, they need to look for white validation to counteract the argument. So therefore, by basically saying it's unfair that Tiffany Cross got fired from MSNBC, now we must bring up a so-called white person who may have the same rhetoric or worse rhetoric than that so-called Black woman in particular. This is a problem I always see, because it's always still trying to revolve around seeking white validation.
His intentional misrepresentation of her platform amounted to no less than a direct attack and should have engendered immediate defense and support of Ms. Cross by her parent network. Instead, it appears that NBC Universal has allowed Fox News to dictate its hiring and unwarranted firing decisions. We cannot afford to be bullied by those who willingly and wantonly drag this country backwards. Given the undeniable rise of fascism and persistent threats to democracy we face in the current moment, NBC should be an unrelenting force for truth and a safe harbor for voices like Ms. Cross, as well as those with whom she shared her broad and popular platform.
Well, that's not how it's going to work. With all love, due and respect, Roland Martin, especially these days. you say rise of fascism, it's going to be fascism and probably more than likely communism, in which you will be reprimanded if you say certain things. So, all this idea about truth and safe spaces and safe harbor for voices like Miss Cross, yeah, you can say that. But in reality, that's not how the game is going to be played, especially with networks like MSNBC, NBC, Fox, and all these different things, because it's also about trying to get the controversial people in there. I mean, I even think about that with Fox Soul, why they have a chatterbox of a bunch of strags who's in their 50s talking shit, and then they sit up there and talk shit about so-called black men all day. Why are they allowed to be on there? Because they fire on their own people. So when you speak out of line and you speak all these different things, yeah, you're going to be reprimanded. But they want to play the game how they want to play the game. So yeah, and in contrast, you can sit there and say, oh yeah, that's not fair. Miss Cross is being fired because of fascism and da 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 da. At the end of the day, they know exactly what they want. And we can call it unfair, but this is always going to be a way that they decide.
While other networks give voice to election deniers, Ms. Cross featured voting rights champions. Where other shows spread disinformation, the Cross Connection spotlighted justice. Where other outlets catered to the country's worst instincts, Ms. Cross elevated the discourse and taught audiences how to protect democracy. There's a persistent theme in the denigrating of Black women's value and the silencing of Black women's voices when they speak uncomfortable but necessary truths about the state of our society. This season is too grave a moment in American history to silence the voices of Black women who, time and again, save America from itself. Tiffany Cross has long been one of those Black women, and her voice is needed now more than ever. We believe you are clear about the dangers we are collectively facing and how reminiscent it is of this nation's dark past. We would like to meet with you before Friday, November 11th, 2022, to discuss a path forward that is restorative to the reputation and dignity of Miss Cross.
And before I continue, this is in no way of me trying to, downplay so-called Black women's voices, because even here on YouTube, I enjoy a lot of so-called Black women commentators, content creators, and all these news correspondents and stuff like that. But I mean, even with the idea of firing Miss Tiffany Cross, there's some smoking windows that I didn't understand, especially reviewing the case itself on why she got fired, especially when she went up on Charlemagne the God's platform and said what she said about Florida and all these different things. And it's funny because for a while, Florida was being on a chopping blocks of criticism because DeSantis did not want certain things happen in his state. I did plenty of videos I did a video covering on DeSantis and about the whole entire thing. Well, let's say, don't say gay bill and stuff like that. And, certain measures that he wanted to take in his state of assuring people that these leftist liberal ideologies will not escape into his state. You know what I mean? So it's just really funny, like she gets attacked for that, and it's just like, you gotta go. And then I think it was some other comments she made that made MSNBC make the decision they made. But continue.
It was signed by Melody Campbell, Cliff Albright, Black Voters Matter Fund, Latasha Brown, Alicia Garza, Rashad Robinson, Derek Johnson of the NAACP, Lenita Baker, National Bar Association, LaFonza Butler, Emily's List, Maurice Mitchell, Working Families Party, Tamika Mallory, Until Freedom, David Johns, the National Black Justice Coalition. It was by myself, Angela Rye, Impact Strategies, Jamel Hill, Unbothered Network, Kerry Champion, Reverend Mark Thompson, Make It Plain, Bishop William Barber III, the Poor People's Campaign, Repairs of the Breach, Ben Crump, Reverend Dr. Iva Carruthers, Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris of the Poor People's Camp. First of all, Carruthers with the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, Reverend Liz Theo Harris, Cairo Center and the Poor People's Campaign, Savante Myrick, People for the American Way, Barbara Arnwine, Transformative Justice Coalition, Hillary Holly, Care in Action. Also, Ajeen Poo, National Domestic Workers Alliance, Kimberly Carter, Rep. GA Institute, Taracia Brown Wilkinson, Our Women in Politics, Jerry Gonzalez, Rebecca Carroll, Cindy Lieb, Rebecca Carroll, Cindy Lieb, Dorian Warren, Tanisha McHarris, Tiffany Flowers, Patrick Gaspard, Toronto Burke, Janice Mathis, as well. Those are the folks who, and Cleola Brown, Mignon Moore, Bishop Leah Daltrey, and Damon Hill with Lawrence Committee for Civil Rights Under Law.
You know what's really funny about that list? I already see about at least 10 names that are controversial figures, and some of them are full of shit when it comes to so-called Black people. Sad but true. But let me get my feelings out of the way, my ideas about these people out the way.
The reality is this here, folks. Also, Keith Olbermann ripped Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, Lawrence O'Donnell for their silence after Tiffany was let go. Now, her contract is up in a month. They said it was her comments. Well, no, they haven't actually given an official reason. It's the sources that we've actually heard from that have been talking. MSNBC gave no statement. But what they did do is, after the letter was dropped, they did release a statement. Lori Ann Asio, Vice President of Communications for NBC News and MSNBC, gave this statement to the Griot that business decisions like this happen all the time. Quote, we received a letter signed by several organizations. We are proud of our long history celebrating diversity on and off air at MSNBC and throughout the news group. This is an ongoing effort and will continue to elevate diverse perspectives and voices during this election season and beyond. And they're going to have a rotation of hosts on the Cross Connection until they finalize their programming. And let me just tell you what's probably going to end up happening. And so go ahead and write it down. MSNBC is paying Jen Psaki a whole bunch of money to come host a show there at MSNBC.
Guess what? Jen Psaki, right? Another so-called white woman. Continue.
And remember, they got rid of Amin's show and Zerlina Maxwell's show on the Peacock channel, okay? Because they're saving money. They're giving Rachel Maddow $30 million to host a show once a week, all right? To keep it from going to Sirius XM or CNN or somewhere else. So here's what's going to happen. They're going to probably move Jen Psaki into Jonathan Capehart's slot on Sunday morning. They're probably going to move Jonathan Capehart into Tiffany's slot on Saturday. Watch it happen. Write it down. It's going to happen. That's what you're actually dealing with there. But really what you're dealing with here, and this is what I keep telling y'all about mainstream media. I spent 6 years at CNN. And when people come up to me like, man, I wish you go back to mainstream media, I said, let me explain something to you. The only person who can fire Roland Martin is God. That's the hierarchy here. I'm the CEO, I'm the owner. God is the only person above me. When you work in that environment, ratings don't matter. They will fire you if they want to. They will choose not to resign you if they choose to.
It's a fact.
And that's what happened here. And so I said this, and I tweeted this. Rashida Jones, who I know, the president, must speak to this issue why Tiffany Cross was not given a new contract, continue hosting her show. Her boss, Cesar Conde, over NBC, must speak to this. His boss, Jeff Shell, who's over all of NBC Universal, must speak to this. They all must speak to it. And Black folks, this is real simple. You got to make a decision. Or are you going to keep watching? What do you hear when Jeff Carr in our promotion, when he says, you need to bring your eyeballs home to Roland Martin Unfiltered and the Black Star Network? The reality is this here. We are the most loyal audience they have. Black folks represent, we watch MSNBC more than anybody else. So we should be saying, this how y'all gonna do a truth teller? And here's the other question.
But now when you define a truth teller, what is a truth teller at this point? You understand? Like, this is one of the sort of things that I'm just like having a trouble thing saying. Like, we know the reason why MSNBC is going to get someone like Tiffany Cross to come around and have a conversation. And again, I must tell you guys, I'm not here to be a gender war provocateur. That's not what this is about. So-called Black people getting into the media is a slippery slope. They want so-called Black people to go with a certain narrative and be able to be on this pro-woke shit with stipulations. There's certain things that you can and you cannot say when you come up on these networks. They're not going to get roasted the same way Kanye West is going to get roasted or how Kyrie Irving is going to be roasted. You understand? So it's always a catch-22 with these type of conversations. Do I like a guy like Roland Martin on TV? Yeah, he's a pretty cool dude. You know what I'm saying? You know, Tiffany Cross has her things where she might say some very notable points. I got to watch her a little bit more consistently, right? Because I don't try to follow these things a lot, but, you know, it's it's always a funny thing, but I always know that a certain narrative is going to be driven on these type of perspectives. You understand? So it doesn't surprise me, but it did surprise me the fact of the matter, if it is alleged that Tiffany Cross was let go because of something she said on Charlemagne and God's network, it's kind of like, wow.
You hired Tiffany Cross for her opinion. So you getting rid of her because of her opinion? Oh, you didn't realize she was a truth teller when she was trying out?
Well, that's the contradiction about what's going on now. It might be the reworkings of the whole entire free speech, because that's what's being contested right now. That's the reason why a lot of these different things is going on. I mean, we can't even base it on race, right? Because even think about it, what just happened. Alex Jones was put to the fire. Dude is already sued for $965 million about the Sandy Hook case. I'm pretty sure there has been different so-called white people who has been canceled or been in trouble or, you know, put to the fire because they have an opinionated voice on certain issues, right? So I don't like to make this a race thing. I mean, look. I mean, let's really be honest. Regardless, at the end of the day, look at how someone like Donald Trump was canceled to the forefront as soon as he got elected. And they said he did so much wrong. But when there was a uncovering of truths about Hillary Clinton, she didn't receive the same backlash, especially with her involvement about different organizations out there in Haiti and those emails that got sent out. You know what I'm saying? You know, there's been plenty of so-called white people's voices that have been canceled. Martin Shkreli, that whole entire guy out there that was sitting up there trying to sell medicine for AIDS or HIV for $700. There's so many people I can dig in the crates right now that has not been so-called black, that's been opinionated and canceled. So that's why I hate going with the race narrative. But do I understand it in perspective? Yes. Tiffany Cross, allegedly, if she said what she said about Florida, then, you know, that's just something that I need more. I'm trying to understand for myself. And what is the reports of why MSNBC decided to get rid of this woman?
So you gave her a show? Explain that. Explain why would you hire somebody to be an opinion host, but then, well, we don't like it. And keep in mind, I've already heard people say, well, you know, she made that comment, she made the comment on Charlemagne's show about Florida and used the word dick. Mark Halperin called Obama that on Morning Joe and got suspended. He was back on the air. The only reason he got fired was because of his Me Too problems. Oh, I'm sorry. Mark Halperin was a white guy who was a favorite of Joe and Mika. Mm-hmm. Tiffany Cross was never a favorite of Joe and Mika. You never saw her on that show, did you?
We're just internal problems. I don't understand that. I'm going to just move on to this last segment.
Well, they're absolutely wrong. Tiffany is a truth teller. And I didn't find her comments offensive at all. I found them actually quite amusing. One time she said something, I said, shoot, I wish I had said that. She's a smart sister who is having a good show. But, you know, Black women take the brunt of so much. And the Mark Halperin example is a great one, but there are many other examples of white boys who can get away with just about anything, except for in this Me Too era, you know, putting their hands on a woman, but they can get away with almost anything else. They can say anything. And it's only when Black women step out there, and more so Black women than Black men, we step out there, suddenly we're under a microscope. As you said, she was hired for her opinion, and she's worked very hard over the course of her career to get to where she is. I'm sure she'll shine somewhere else, but MSNBC needs to be shamed and rolling. Maybe we should start talking about boycott. Maybe that's what we should be doing.
Well,
boycotting ain't gonna do shit. I'm just gonna be really honest with you. Boycotting is not gonna do a damn thing. I mean, especially if you're trying to honor it on the fact that it's supposed to go with this, you know, preserve Black culture thing and preserve, you know, Black people rights to speak on the network. That ain't gonna do shit. You know, much as respect to the lady that's talking, but you know, at the end of the day, they go with who they want to. So if they want to decide to get another so-called Black woman to fill in the lines, they will. If they decide to go with a so-called white woman, they will. Much so, it probably will be a so-called white woman because, of course, we still live in a society of white. I'm sorry. white preference. So, it's not about white supremacy, it's about white preference, but, teach his own on that.
The reason I said this beforehand, the reason you did not hear me say that word is because I followed the model of Operation Breadbasket. Boycott was the last thing that they did because they had to do education up front. One of the biggest mistakes that we make is that we throw boycott out first. My deal is, let's educate our people, enlighten our people. They met with them, and then if the answer wasn't satisfactory, they got back, then they went to the next step. And so the worst thing in the world, that's why you will rarely ever hear me say it. I don't throw that out there because if we have not prime positioned our people here to understand what the issue is, then a boycott actually fails.
Thank you. And that's the exact reason I want to stay along and hear that perspective. That's the problem. Boycotting first without an idea or understanding is usually the reason why these type of situations never go anywhere. You understand? That's something, I mean, I get it. I used to be involved in those boycotts, stand strongly on what you believe in. And if you feel like something is being done wrong, then you go ahead and you say something. But the thing about it is, if you have no knowledge, I'm not going to even say if you don't have no knowledge, if you don't have a perspective about things that's going on, what is boycott going to do? You understand? That's why it's so hard to have these conversations sometimes, because you're just moving off the fact of the matter something happened. You're not understanding the perspective. You're not understanding the ins and outs. You're not understanding even looking at the contract. See, the thing about it is, look at the contract. What does it say? Has there been anything in her contract that she know that if she violates that, she would be fired? See, so, and that's the problem. We cannot always boycott over every simple thing. At first, we have to understand what's going on. We have to assess the situation. We have to just be able to come collectively as a group and say, okay, this is the plan. Now we need to have a meeting. We need to have the understanding. What happened? Why did this go on? Okay, I don't like what you said. That's still not a fair thing. Now boycott. You understand? There's different ways that I would handle the situation before I say, let me go ahead and boycott this network because they fired a Black woman over making a joke or saying a comment that has to deal with Florida and relating it to a phallus with dick.
That's the only reason. That's the only reason. Renita.
Well, I hope that my comments will help with some of that education, because we need to quickly get to the part where we boycott. Here's what I've always noticed.
See what I mean? See what I mean? I said you gotta be strategic when it comes to these networks. You understand? And Renita already said up there, said we gotta get to boycotting. Like you're not listening. You're not listening.
MSNBC. This is a left-leaning network, yet most of the people that they have hosting the various shows are not Black people who are the base of the Democratic Party. They've got Joe and Mika with a 2-hour show every day.
No, baby. After that got bumped to 4 hours.
Oh, okay. Well,
like I said, I don't know the ins and outs of all of this, but I will tell you this. The firing of Tiffany Cross and, the boycotting things, it's just more understanding on that. But, maybe I don't know it as much as I should. But I'll give more thoughts into other situations revolved around the elections, Tiffany Cross, and other videos such as that. But make sure you give your thoughts in the comment section. Peace.